chariot troops or a company of infantry, still they leave themselves unprotected. For what reason? Because that protection is external, not internal. Therefore, they leave themselves unprotected.
Thank you. And I believe we have Young Kwe next. Thank you so much, Soanne. And I believe we have Young Kwe.
But those who engage in good conduct of body, speech, and mind protect themselves. Even though no company of elephant troops protects them, nor a company of cavalry, nor a company of charioteers, nor a company of infantry, still they protect themselves. For what reason? Because that protection is internal, not external. Therefore, they protect themselves. So it is, great king. So it is, great king.
Thank you.
Okay.
No, go ahead. You know what? You might as well finish, Young Kwe. Thank you.
Good is restraint with the body. Restraint by speech is also good. Good is restraint with the mind. Restraint everywhere is good. Conscientious, everywhere restrained, one is said to be protected.
Thank you so much. Stephen, did you want to stop and discuss, or maybe go on to Mallikā?
Well, maybe we should go on to Mallikā. It seems to me that these two kind of go together as a set, perhaps.
I thought so too. Okay, great. It looks like we have Bonita.
Yeah. Can you hear me?
We can.
Yeah. At Savatthi, now on that occasion, King Pasenadi of Kosala had gone together with Queen Mallikā to the upper terrace of the palace. Then King Pasenadi of Kosala said to Queen Mallikā, "Is there, Mallikā, anyone more dear to you than yourself? There is no one great king more dear to me than myself. But is there anyone great king more dear to you than yourself? For me too, Mallikā, there is no one more dear than myself." Then King Pasenadi of Kosala descended from the palace and approached the Blessed One. Having approached, he paid homage to the Blessed One, sat down to one side, and related to the Blessed One his conversation with Queen Mallikā. Then the Blessed One, having understood the meaning of this, on that occasion recited this verse: "Having traversed all quarters with the mind, one finds none anywhere dearer than oneself. Likewise, each person holds himself most dear. Hence, one who loves himself should not harm others."
Thank you so much. It's so beautiful. I love that stanza. That would be actually a wonderful one to memorize.
It's very famous, and I think I know it also appears in the Udana, in the exalted utterances. And I think it's interesting. We have a little file to share of an Upanishad that we believe it's what scholars predate the Buddha. And I think we're not here, of course, to tell you about the Upanishads per se, but I think it is a very interesting thing to look at.
Can you, Stephen, just, for those who are unaware, explain the Upanishads and their place within Buddhist society at that time, just briefly?
Well, this is called the Bṛhadāraṇyaka Upaniṣad, and the Upanishads are part of the Vedic literature. They're all in Sanskrit. And this Upanishad, this particular one, the Bṛhadāraṇyaka, is said to almost certainly predate the Buddha. It's very old. And it's often been speculated that the Buddha himself probably knew it or knew about it or was familiar with it. And it has this very striking section in the beginning. We sort of edited it out, but there's a conversation between a husband and wife asking one another who is the most dear. But of course it's rather different. So to look at it, maybe I'll read it out very quickly. So this is from chapter 1. And it's talking about the self of the sense of the Atman. So this is not a Buddhist idea, but this is the sense of a sort of what we might call a soul. But the soul can be said to sort of merge with a larger sort of consciousness, Brahma. So Atma can merge with Brahma. And it says, this innermost thing, this self, it is dearer than a son. It is dearer than wealth. It is dearer than everything else. If a man claims that something other than his self is dear to him, and someone were to tell him that he would lose what he holds dear, that is liable to happen. So a man should regard only his self as dear to him. When a man regards his self as dear to him, what he holds dear will never perish. And here in the second chapter, even maybe more striking, one holds a husband dear, you see, not out of love for the husband. Rather, it is out of love for oneself that one holds a husband dear. One holds beings dear, not out of love for beings. Rather, it is out of love for oneself that one holds beings dear. You see, it is oneself which one should see and hear, and on which one should reflect and concentrate. For by seeing and hearing oneself, and by reflecting and concentrating on one's self, one gains the knowledge of this whole world. So here in the Upanishads, I'm certainly not very knowledgeable about them, but I think what's being pointed to is this kind of we're all one concept, which is perhaps not as stressed in Pali Buddhism, that you are me and I am you kind of thing. This is not something we see so much stressed, I would say, in the Pali Buddhism. And what's interesting is what we see in the suttas that we looked at from the Samyutta Nikaya is much more of a kind of ethical kind of thing. Do good deeds. Be kind to yourself. Be kind to others. But I have to say, just speaking frankly, that I haven't fully understood the relationship between these two texts. So we can say for certain that this text predates our Buddhist text, but to what extent they differ and to what extent they are saying the same thing, I'm actually not quite sure. What do you think, Regina?
I think that I too am not quite sure. One can see in chapter 1, it's just so very similar to, the Queen Mallikā, what she says to King Pasenadi. But in terms of anything else, it's a little confusing.
It definitely seems kind of confusing. And for a little bit of help, I can read Bhikkhu Bodhi's footnote to this Queen Mallikā's verse, or the Blessed One's verse about it, because it might be helpful. He says, whereas in the Upanishad, there's a transcendent self, the Atman, which is, quote, to be seen, to be heard, to be perceived, to be marked. The Buddha extracts an ethical maxim. Since one loves oneself above all others, one should realize the same is true of others and treat them with kindness and respect. And so it seems like Venerable Bodhi is stressing that there would seem to be more of this kind of kindness and ethical quality stressed in the Buddhist version, more so than the Vedic version. And what he seems to be saying is, since we all know that we love ourselves the most, we should understand that everyone else is like that as well. And by understanding that, we should be kind to them. Although I have to say, it's a little hard for me to wrap my mind fully around what that might fully entail. So maybe we could ask if anyone has some ideas about this. It seems a little hard to unpack.
It looks like Ken has his hand up. Ken?
Yes, the what I would put in the context is, and it's that W.S. Merwin verse that you started with, reminds me very much of the line in the Dhammapada, the Piyavaga section, where it says, grief arises from holding things dear, and fear arises from holding things dear, and that you become free of grief and fear by not holding things dear. That's the Buddhist idea. And in the context of that, both last week's discussion and this week's, it's just what you were saying, Stephen. It's all about the ethics and doing the right thing. The pointing out of holding ourselves dear is just like skillful teaching. Remember that. It's not the point.
Thank you so much, Ken. Tarania, you have your hand up?
Thank you. Yeah, this has always been a puzzle to me too. And then thinking about it, because like Stephen was saying, you know, there isn't this Atman in Dhamma, in Buddhism, you know, this long enduring self. But you know, because we have the teaching of anatta, which is a non-self teaching. But I put them in different categories, because when you really contemplate what good sila does for the heart or for the being, I you know, you find that it's really it's like it's developing a really strong core, you know, which has this sense of self to it. You know what I mean? And so that's being encouraged, and as long as that core is strong, then it's almost like you get a force field around yourself, where when there's an impulse to behave badly, you know, the following impulse is to pull back and not do that. So I love that. I see them really pointing to there's non-self, and then there's a strong core, which is very different. They aren't contradictory.
Thank you. I also really love the idea of the force field.
Force field, yeah, a little bit of Star Wars in there.
It makes me think of the Hiri and Otapa in the way that they protect us as well. Yang Kui?
So I'm not having so much trouble like using the term self in this context. It's I feel like these teachings are for lay people, and there's something very practical about that. Just relationally, take good care of yourself. When you take good care of yourself, you're taking care of other people. And this is an act of love. That ethics is an act of love, because it's being a friend to yourself. So it feels very consistent from what we read from the beginning of self-protection, the ethical foundation, that it is about being a friend. So that's what I'm reading this right now.
Thank you, Yang Kui. So perhaps we'll go on to read a bit more.
I wanted to come back to the verse from Mallikā, because I still think there's more what we can see here.
Absolutely. Let me reshare my screen. Give me just a second. Share screen. Okay.
I think that a good point was made that these were, teachings. These are teachings that were delivered to lay people, and perhaps there is a danger of over extracting too much sort of deep meaning about what they might be talking about. And maybe they are kind of saying, be nice to people. And when you are nice to people, you'll be happy too. Be nice to yourself, be nice to other people. It's a good way to go. But if you can go down to the verse that's attached to number 8.
Sure. Oh, this one right
there,
here.
yeah.
Yes, that's beautiful.
So of course, I think probably most of us can agree with the second line. One finds no one anywhere dearer than oneself. Although I have to say, probably not everyone honestly thinks that. This could be seen as a sort of a problem when you don't really like yourself. And I think that's something to look at. And so I think we are being told here that we should, in a sense, value ourselves very highly and maybe more than anyone else. And if we don't, we should maybe be concerned about that, because self-dislike, self-hatred even, is not something that should be cultivated. It's probably something that should be investigated and even discarded. And so I think this line itself is something one can work with to see how it lines up with one's true feelings about one's sense of value, one's sense of importance, and like or dislike. But it's the last two lines which I find almost puzzling when it says, each person holds himself most dear. Hence, one who loves himself should not harm others. And for me, this almost seems to be, if I look at it, at least at first, a non sequitur. Because why should it be that because I love myself, I shouldn't harm others? Because one might take sort of a reflexive, self-centered view, which could be, for argument's sake, well, I really think I'm the most important, and I'll just trample over anyone who gets in my way. So it doesn't seem to necessarily follow that if someone truly loves themselves, they won't harm other people. Because I think we can see, if we look out at ourselves on certain occasions in our lives, and also maybe at other people who seem to be pretty happy about themselves, they're not so kind to other people, although we're told we should not. But I'm just kind of worried, not worried, but wondering and trying to understand better the sort of moral implications here. Why is it that we shouldn't harm others when we love ourselves? What do you think, Regina?
Well, I think it goes right back to what we were discussing in the beginning, looking at the bodily experience. I mean, causing harm comes from a certain place, doesn't it? It doesn't come from loving kindness. It could come from benign neglect, but generally speaking, causing harm requires a sort of malintention coming from a place of aversion or hate, and that's not pleasant. So in the moment, we can see that this is harmful to oneself. That's being a foe to ourselves in the here and now. But also we have to look at the karmic implications. And if we understand the law of karma, we understand that we cannot cause harm to any living being without it reflecting back on us. It's just simply not possible.
I think that's a great point. I think that's a great point, because in a way, doing harm, even if it's not to ourselves, but it's to others, will eventually harm us. It's a very important Dhamma point. Terania, what do you think?
Yeah, I agree. I mean, I remember one of the monks telling us that Buddha gets a bad rap because they think he's anti-pleasure sometimes, but he's the ultimate pleasure seeker. And the pleasure, it comes from dana and sila. So like you perfect your generosity and your good conduct, and you will be happy. I think that's what those last two lines are speaking to. Why would you, if you're hurting anybody, you're not going to be happy. It's not going to feel good.
Yeah. And so maybe we don't have to necessarily have this kind of cosmic Atman concept to maybe behave the very same way. Because even though we might not accept the idea that we're all one mega consciousness somewhere, of course, that's kind of an unfair characterization of the Upanishads. I don't mean to belittle it. I just claim I don't really understand it very well. But even if we don't hold that idea so closely, we can still accept the idea that our actions will have consequences, and if we behave badly towards others, it's a good chance that something will befall us as well. Something might be unwanted will occur to us. Things almost kind of obvious in a sense that if we go around treating people poorly, the result would be that they don't like us, and maybe they want to harm us, and maybe they want to not be around us, and that wouldn't be nice for us either. And so we certainly have to always keep in mind that our actions do have consequences, and that good actions have good consequences, and bad actions have bad consequences.
And like Regina said, we're the heirs of our actions. I love that.
That's right.
That's a really good point.
Thanks, Terania. Yes, we certainly are. And I see two hands raised, Brahman Levy and then Sarah.
I guess I'll jump in. Sarah.
Okay.
Yeah, I just wanted to say that, I don't have the Upanishad in front of me anymore, but it seems like there is an identical, like laying out the premise of holding oneself dear. And then the conclusion in the Upanishad is that self, I assume it would be the self. If you hold it the most dear, it will never perish. Whereas in this verse, in the Buddhist verse, it's if you hold yourself dear, you would never harm others. So it's like an identical premise, but the profoundly different conclusion. To me, that's what pops out the most. And I think that, I don't know anything about the Upanishads, but that's what struck me as the most profound. Like Stephen has said many times, it's like almost radical. It's like, you end up, you're not going to harm others, I think is very profound conclusion there of the self, holding the self dear.
But Sarah, could you say one more time? I didn't quite understand or catch it. Why would you say it's radically different from what we find in the Upanishad?
Well, because the line, if I can remember it correctly, the last line was, if you hold yourself dear, that will never perish. Look at that line. I'm going by my memory, so.
Sorry, I'm trying to find the document, and it's.
There we go. It's 392, the last line. It's, hence one who loves himself. Whoops, no, that's ours.
Right.
Where's the Upanishad?
I'm so sorry with all of the Zoom controls and such. It's hard to, okay. Stephen, do you have it in front of you? I might have closed it. I'm so sorry. I don't have it up in front of me right now.
Well, I'll read it from my book here. One of the lines maybe would be, one holds being dear, not out of love for beings. Rather, it is out of love for oneself that one holds beings dear.
No, it's something about it will never perish. If you hold yourself dear, it was the very end of the passage that you had put up.
It does.
Sorry, I should have had a screenshot of it. Anyway, my great point is lost because.
Oh darn! I'm so sorry, Sarah.
No, that's all right. But it was something about you would never perish.
Right. It did.
Which is to me such a fundamental difference in the Buddhist view, which is if you hold yourself dear, then you should not harm others. So maybe if you find it, you can pop it up.
Okay, I think I found it. It says here, a man should regard only his self as dear to him. When a man regards his self as dear to him, what he holds dear will never perish. Yeah.
So, Brahman?
Yes. So two thoughts. One, I'm sure we're familiar with Sharon Salzberg, who was introduced the practice of metta. At least she was instrumental, and it taught in the same way it's taught in the Sutta, in that progressive affirmational way, starting with oneself, one's mentor or spiritual benefactor and so forth, progressing through one who's difficult to all beings. I've heard it said that many people, and I can't remember if it was Sharon Salzberg whose teacher told her for 6 months, just do it on yourself. But that many people have difficulty in the West focusing that much attention and energy on ourselves. And so it's almost like counter-reflexive that those last, can you show those 2 lines at the end of what the Buddha said to King Pasenadi in that sutta? Yeah. Yeah, so likewise, each person holds himself most dear, and just out of that, then that was, hence one would love himself, should not harm others, because that should spring from that that strong self that loves itself. And then the other thing that comes to mind is the sutta, and Tarnia, I think I need you to help me, of the 2 acrobats. One was a man and one was a woman. And the man, her boss says, let's keep an eye on each other, and that way we'll survive and everything will go well. And she corrects him and says, no, you watch yourself and I'll watch myself, and then we'll all be safe. Something this. So in other words, the strong self is needed, and you need to pay attention to your own heart before you can contribute to other beings.
Right, that's the Siddhaka Sutta with the little girl who is the acrobat. Yes, that's exactly it. It's sort of, you've all probably heard the metaphor with it's when you're flying and they say, put the oxygen mask over your mouth first.
Right.
Like that.
Yeah.
And it's so true. When you don't have that oxygen, it is very hard to care for others. And if anyone has ever been a caretaker, you know exactly what I'm talking about. You have to. It's not a selfish act. It's an imperative, and it's done because you can't be good to anyone else unless you're good to yourself. This isn't on many, many, many levels. This is just how you treat the the cashier. Of course, who does checkout anymore? Who goes to the store? I don't even know. But it includes anyone who we interact with. If we are not kind to ourselves, I mean, my goodness, have you not met people who speak harshly to others? This is because this is their internal dialogue, is one of inner harshness towards the self. I used to think that metta was really just I really had strong aversion towards metta. But I realized that until I could get rid of this strong amount of self, really contempt towards the self, I would not be the type of person that I wanted. I would not be the loving, kind person that I wanted to be. And I really wanted to be a nice person. But it's an inside job. I love that sutta. Thank you so much, Brahman, for bringing it up. I mean, this has been really a super powerful meeting for me. I really appreciate everyone showing up for it. And I hope that, until we meet again Sunday, that this refrain, and maybe play with I think it's great to memorize suttas, but if you can remember this refrain, I think even just rereading it a couple times a day can help people to be kinder to themselves. I don't know. What do you think, Stephen?
I think it's a great point, and I think it's very easy to be wrapped up in sort of this conceptualism about what we're supposed to do because we've been told to, while we don't really understand what's happening to ourselves as it's happening. And I think maybe this goes quickly back to this idea of feeling in the body what these actions are doing to you, because I think very often we try to do things maybe because we've been told to follow the precepts, so we do, which is of course a wonderful idea, but we might never fully understand why if we don't actually see the results in ourselves, because we're kind of wrapped up in the idea of it rather than the actuality of it. And so I think these are wonderful suttas to sort of really inhabit and spend time with and see, how are they actually affecting me? It's not just another thing to study and read. It's incredibly powerful wisdom that we can find great benefit from.
Right. And I think that's so key. We want to study the suttas, but we want to integrate them. So if you can find ways to integrate finding yourself most dear, this is huge, really. I know it's awkward and feels icky, but if you can try and do that, well, gee, which ways can I find myself most dear? I will do this assignment with y'all. Steve, I'm going to ask you to do it too, but if we can come back on Sunday and discuss that, I think it would be really neat.
Okay, but we have to do it Thursday.
All right. I don't know. Yeah, I don't know which day is which. So thank you so much for keeping me on track. I'm one of the many millions of the unemployed. So each day is the same. I don't even know. Is today's Thursday? No, it's Sunday. No. Okay, we'll do it Thursday.
We'll do it Thursday.
We'll do it Thursday. It's all good. And I look forward to seeing y'all. By the way, if you were unable to attend last Thursday, when Diane gave her beautiful presentation on Mrs. CAF Reese Davies, the video is now on the website, and I encourage everyone to check it out. It's fascinating. It's a fascinating depiction of this woman's life and the great work she did in translating the Pali Suttas. So please do check that out. And I'm providing the link for any who feel they would like to support us with Dana. And I am so glad that you were able to spend this morning with us. And those of you for whom it's evening, I'm so glad you were able to spend this evening with us. And we've run out of time, but we want to send metta to your heart. So from our heart to yours, thank you, everyone. And may you all be well, and see you soon.
Thank you.
Goodbye.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. Namo Buddhaya.
Thank you.
Have a good night.
You.
Be
Thank
well.
you. Thank you. And good morning to everyone as well.
Good morning.
Incredible.
Have a good night to you.
You too.